be at the scheduled time, go ahead and register for it, and we will email you a recording of the event, and you can watch it whenever it's convenient for you. For tonight's presentation, we're happy to be partnering with our wonderful nonprofit sister organizations, Oregon Wild and the Mazamas. If you are here tonight through an invitation from one of these organizations, thanks you so much for joining us. If you don't know these organizations, you can see their website addresses on the screen right now. I encourage you to learn more about the great work that they do and that you could potentially join in. Our presenter tonight is Eli Boschetto. Eli is going to tell us how to get started planning a big goal like completing a full state piece of the Pacific Crest Trail as a section hiker. His expertise is in the Oregon PCT, and he'll start us there and give us an idea of what we can see on the trail. Eli is fully qualified to talk about this topic because he is the author of the new book, Hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, Oregon, a project he spent 4 years hiking, researching, and writing, and that Mountaineers Books is really proud to have published. Eli's book is one of a 4-book set that covers the entire trail from Mexico to Canada. In addition to writing Hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, Oregon, Eli has worked as a professional trail writer and photographer for more than a decade. He has been the Northwest correspondent for Backpacker magazine and the editor and art director for Washington Trails magazine. He lives in Portland, and he is currently working on 2 more guidebooks for the state. You can learn more about his travels and work by visiting his website at pctoregon.com. Eli's presentation will run about 30 minutes this evening, followed by a Q&A. Feel free to submit questions at any time during the presentation in the control panel question box on the right side, probably the upper right hand corner of your screen. And so let's get started. Welcome, Eli. I'm handing controls over to you when I push some buttons here. So I think you've got it now.
All right, thank you, Doug, for that introduction. I hope everybody can hear me, and that was a smooth transition. Thank you also again to our friends Oregon Wild and the Mazamas for sponsoring this evening's event, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. I'm happy to see that everybody who is in attendance tonight is taking their first step towards planning what could be a big hiking adventure on the Pacific Crest Trail. And hopefully by the end of tonight's webinar, you'll be a step closer to fulfilling those plans and getting out there to enjoy some of Oregon's backcountry this summer. So when we talk about the Pacific Crest Trail, most people start thinking immediately that the Pacific Crest Trail is too long, too far, and too difficult for the average hiker. Slides are not progressing. But we're gonna tonight dispel some of those myths. There we go. Dispel some of those myths about the PCT so that you can get out there and start planning a hike of your own. Most importantly, doing it in a way that works well for you, namely like within your own capability, within your own time frame, and in a way that makes you feel happy getting out there and enjoying the backcountry. So just by way of kind of summary, looking at the Pacific Crest Trail, this is our West Coast long distance national scenic trail. It covers about 2,660 miles all the way through California, Oregon, and Washington. California obviously has the most mileage, the most difficult terrain for the area that it passes through, and then Washington on the other side also has some challenges unto itself. Oregon, right smack in the middle, is what we call the easy state of the Pacific Crest Trail, and this is one of the things that's going to help you get out there and enjoy your first long distance hike if you're not familiar with going longer distances. And I'm sorry, we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty here. I'm sorry, can we do the slides? I apologize for the technical problem here, folks. We're going to get this sorted out. There we go. So, as Doug mentioned, Mountaineers Books is proud to introduce a new series of Hiking the Pacific Crest Trail guidebooks specifically geared towards section hikers. I had the pleasure of being in charge of the Oregon book, which is currently available, as is the Washington book written by my friend Tammy Asars, and we're expecting California books to come out later this year. So let's talk about section hiking, because this is how we're going to make the PCT accessible to you as what we like to refer to as the typical hiker. You're not going to get out there and you're not going to hike several hundred miles over a course of several months in the summer, because like most of us, you probably have jobs, family, and other obligations that keep you from getting out for extended periods of time like this. So this is where we're going to talk about getting out there and making a trail that's customized just for you. And one of the reasons that you're going to want to do a hike like this is because there's a lot of places that you're not going to be able to get to just by day hiking. And so that's where, you know, taking an extended hike on the Pacific Crest Trail is going to get you into some really remarkable areas. One of those is the area that you're looking at right now. This is Silver Basin in the Siskiyou Mountains, way down in southern Oregon. This is a bit of a, this would be too long of a hike for your average day hike, but by getting out for a little bit longer period, you can see big long ridgelines like this, wide open glacial basins, summer wildflower meadows, and lots of wildlife. Some other areas that you'll be able to see are some of Oregon's remote wilderness areas. Like here, this is out near the Mount Thielsen Wilderness, where you definitely have to spend a few days to get back into this area, and when you do, the views are spectacular. And of course, there's some hidden gems in Oregon's backcountry in the form of lush old-growth forests and some pretty spectacular alpine lakes. Slides. Sorry, folks, we're having just a little bit of a challenge with our slideshow progressing properly tonight. There we go. So this view that you're looking at right here, one of my favorite areas on the Pacific Crest Trail. This is right near the foot of the Diamond Peak Wilderness at Summit Lake. Definitely an area you want to spend a few days getting back to, because getting to sit back at the side of this lake is quite a treat. So let's get into finding out how you can access these areas and start planning a trip of your own. Slide. So looking at Oregon as a total, if we're looking at trail miles, we're looking at 455 miles. In order to make those sections easy to access and start planning, you know, a trip that you could do in the course of about a week, we've divided the state up into 6 sections, beginning at the bottom and heading south to north. And each state averages about 60 to 90 miles, which you can do at your own pace. Some of those larger sections can even be divided up into smaller sections so that depending on how much time you have available, you can plan accordingly. Next, with each of these sections, you'll be able to get into some pretty spectacular wilderness areas, and they all range quite a bit in diversity. From the southern portions, you can experience the oak groves and grass meadows of the Soda Mountain Wilderness until you get and then work your way into the higher mountain ranges of the central state, where you have the Diamond Peak Wilderness, the Three Sisters Wilderness, and then as you approach the northern portion of the state, you get into Oregon's big mountains with the Mount Jefferson and Mount Hood wilderness areas. So in order to access these locations, you have to be able to get to the trail. And the nice thing is that there are 15 trailheads on easy-to-use highways and secondary roads that will help you get to these sections. Many of them even have midpoints where you can access the trail. And most of these trailheads can be reached just by using a normal passenger car. You don't have to worry about having a high clearance vehicle and driving bombed out forest roads where you may drop your transmission at any time. Each of these locations were picked for their easy access so that you don't have to worry about damaging your car or driving out to the back of beyond to get somewhere too remote. As you can see, sorry folks, there's a little bit of a delay with our slides here. But as you can see, these are a lot of the main highways that you can use, both from the east and west sides. And as you can see, there's access points from just about every major metro center, from Portland, Salem, Eugene, Roseburg, and the Medford areas on the west side of the crest, to Klamath Falls and Bend on the east side of the crest. So there's no shortage of access points for you to be able to pick a section and get to it easily as you like. In addition to all of these trailheads and the roads that you can use to get to them, there are quite a number of resources either on or very near the PCT that can help you set up a trip so that it's comfortable for you and you can make sure that you are easily supplied with everything that you need. Maybe you want a camp spot before you start your trip. We'll let you know where those camp spots are. Maybe you need to get groceries, to load up for your trip. There's references for where you can pack up groceries, where you might be able to get a cheeseburger and other things of that nature, so that you can really customize a trip from start to finish and not just see what's on the trail, but also have information about what's around the trail as well. So now that we've got that information, we're going to start planning a PCT hike. And to do that, we're going to dive into some of these resources with a little bit more detail so that we can customize the hike to our own interest and ability. Now, each of the 6 sections, as we mentioned earlier, has been divided up for their length and their accessibility, but we also consider the length of time that it takes what we call the average hiker to cover Oregon's mountain terrain. And just kind of touching on Oregon's mountain terrain, a lot of it for the most part is mild to moderate. You don't have to be an ultra marathoner or a triathlete, or an uber outdoorsman to go and hike across Oregon. If you've got a little bit of stamina and the will to do it, you can tackle just about any section of the PCT in Oregon with few challenges. But getting back to our individual sections, as you can see from the graph here, you can do all of these in about a week's time, give or take a day or two. And we're going to help you out by giving you some suggested itineraries so that you can customize your trip according to how fast you hike. And again, we kind of based these on the thought that the average hiker likes to cover about 12 or so miles a day comfortably carrying a heavy load. So you don't necessarily need to plan to go out there and hike a big 25-mile day. We don't like to do that. We like to take our time. We like to enjoy ourselves. Okay. In addition to those itineraries, we've got an abundance of maps to help you plan these trips so that you can get a look at the terrain that you're going to be covering, both by way of topographic maps and elevation profiles, and each of these things are going to point out to you where you're going to be able to find campsites, water sources, side trails, nearby resorts and other facilities so that you can paint a picture in your mind where you're going to be hiking, how you're going to be hiking, and what you can look forward to as you're hiking through each of these areas. Okay. Because one thing that that can really hamper a hiking trip, and I can say this from personal experience, is not knowing what you're getting into. I myself have been on a lot of trips where I pick an area, I don't do a whole lot of research about it, I have my map and I know where I'm going, but I just kind of like spitball where I'm going to go. I figure I find a campsite wherever one comes across, and I'm sure there's going to be water in this stream. Well, sometimes that's good. Other times that can be a little bit nerve-wracking, especially if you're getting out into the woods on a long-distance trek for the first time. So in order to help simplify that, we're just giving you a ton of information to help you plan your trip so that you know where all of these resources in the way of camps and water and other things are going to be to make things easier for you on your end. Of course, it's always good to keep an open mind and have a little bit of flexibility, because sometimes nature can throw curveballs at you, or maybe if you're hiking along, you're having a great day, you get to the camp that you thought you were going to want to stop at, and you realize, what, I've still got some gas in the tank, I'm having a great time, I want to keep going. You're going to know how far you can keep going, and you're going to have another campsite ahead of you, so that you know where you can stop for the evening and throw down your tent. Let's see if we can get our slide to advance here. And of course, speaking of those local resources, this is something that I consider exceptionally valuable when I'm planning a trip, because I like to know where I'm going to be and what kind of resources I'm going to have available. And this comes in especially handy if you realize halfway to your trailhead, you think, oh wow, I left my water filter on my kitchen counter. Well, we're going to let you know where you're going to be able to find a gear shop so that you can go and pick up a water filter. Or if you're looking for a place to crash for the evening before you get on the trail, there's going to be information about that as well. One of my favorite things to do is look forward to where I'm going to be able to go and get a good meal if I want to detour off of the trail. And as mentioned earlier, there's quite a few good resorts and lodges along the PCT here in Oregon where they have nice cafes and dining rooms, where you can get a shower, where you can do laundry if you need to, where you can get a soft bed. And if you're feeling especially ambitious and thinking, you know what, I want to hike halfway across the state, or perhaps even the whole state, there's an abundance of information about how to set up resupply packages so that you can prepare yourself to hike long distances and know that you're going to have all the food, equipment, and other materials that you're going to need to keep you going on the trail without having to get off and interrupt your trip. And then once you have an idea of the trip that you want to take, how much time you want to spend out there, you've started plotting your trip using one of the guidebooks, using some of your maps, and you're ready to get going, then I encourage everybody to visit pctoregon.com, because this is where you're going to find even more information to help you prepare for your trip and get out there and enjoy yourself. This is the website that I created after I finished the guidebook, because I realized I had so many resources and so much information available that I wanted to make it available to all of Oregon's PCT hikers. So here you'll find updates on trail conditions, news about the trail, where and how to get permits for certain areas that require camping permits. There's a library of different resources. We offer gear reviews and hiking tips, and we even sometimes have fun contests where we give away free gear. As a matter of fact, we have a big contest going on right now with a couple of gear prizes that you might be interested in. So again, I encourage you to click on over to pctoregon.com and check it out. So after you've done your homework, you've got your trip all ready, you've got your trip planned and you're ready to go, then it's time to take a hike. It's time to get out there and enjoy Oregon's backcountry, because it is just waiting to be enjoyed. one of the greatest things about Oregon is the diversity of its landscape, because Oregon is quite a dynamic state in its natural history. We've got, quite a lot of geologic forces that have shaped Oregon, not to mention natural forces and other elements that have really created a unique state here in Oregon. Just looking at the slide in front of you right now, this is located right in Oregon's central section in the Three Sisters Wilderness, where you get to hike alongside giant skyscraping volcanoes that have glaciers scattered around their flanks as you cross wide open wildflower meadows in the middle of spring, and you can listen for whistling marmots and watch for deer and really just enjoy some incredible park-like settings. There are other areas where you can cross barren moonscape lava fields where, more recent natural forces have impacted Oregon's landscape, leaving these just wide open scorched scars of land in the middle of the state. And while it may look fairly desolate, it's actually a fascinating area to explore, just because you get to see the building blocks of how Oregon came to be without all of the organic cover that you see over most of the rest of the state right now. Of course, Oregon is known for its trees, so you're going to be seeing lots of trees here in Oregon. Everything from mossy old growth forest to second and third generation forest. There are some burned forests, there are some new forest, and there are some dead forests. After all, Oregon did get its moniker, the Green Tunnel, from all of these trees that we see here in the state. And while it may seem imposing at first, each of these forests are unique in their own sense and offer quite a lot of diversity and wonder within themselves that are waiting to be seen. And then, of course, you get to experience some of Oregon's big mountains like Mount Hood and Mount Jefferson. This here is Mount Hood overlooking the wide Zigzag River, which at some point, if you choose to hike this section, this is section 6 by the way, you'll get to see this up close and personal. And it's one of the big visual treats that you'll experience on your journey across Oregon. Well, that was just your teaser of some of the scenery that you're going to see here in Oregon. Don't forget, there's going to be plenty of sunrises and sunsets, rainbows and rainstorms as you get out there. Be prepared for all manner of weather, even in the middle of summertime, because it can be quite a mixed bag. That's a good reason to be prepared when you go out there. I always encourage people to take rain gear and warm jackets, even in the middle of summertime, because you never know what kind of curveball nature may throw at you. But with all of that, I hope this has been a little taste of the PCT to get you excited about planning your own trip and getting out there to experience Oregon's backcountry. For more information, you can definitely pick up one of the guidebooks or visit pctoregon.com. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and I'm going to throw it back to Doug. Thanks, everybody.
Well, Eli, we have a question. We have several questions. And the first one from Peter is, like many people, my biggest questions relate to current and expected snow and water, creek, river crossing conditions now and for balance of the season. So I guess the question is, when can he go?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for your question. And that is actually a great question, and it's one I've been getting a lot of lately because we had quite a winter and spring here in the Northwest, and quite frankly, there is still quite a bit of snow out on the mountains, especially along the Cascade Crest in the central and northern areas. So this can definitely keep travel on the PCT for the present fairly challenging if you're not familiar with winter navigation or route finding. And so I definitely encourage you to have those skills if you're going to get out in some of these difficult areas. Typically here in Oregon, the snow is pretty much melted off by the middle of July, so we still have a few weeks to wait. We're starting to get some warm weather now, so we're hoping it's going to accelerate that melting so that we can all get out and enjoy the trail. As far as river crossings go, you won't experience any challenging river crossings until you get to the northern part of the state around Mount Jefferson and Mount Hood. And presently, with the warming weather and the current high runoff, those crossings can be dangerous and challenging if you're not careful. It's definitely a good idea to scout river crossings up and down for the safest crossing space. And if it just looks too dangerous, don't risk it. Definitely turn around and go back the other way. Hopefully by the middle of summertime, usually by the end of July into early August, the snow is gone, the bugs have kind of dispersed a little bit, and the river levels have dropped down to manageable levels. Then usually the PCT is quite accessible for hiking the whole way through the state.
Eli, Ken from Chicago has a question also about weather. He's planning to hike Section 4 in mid-August, and he's curious how cold it can get overnight, and would like to get the proper clothing. Also, any snow to worry about in that area, the heavy snow with the heavy snowfall this year. But first, back to the first, how cold can he expect? Should he bring a 10-degree sleeping bag?
In the middle of summer in Oregon, evenings at higher elevations, and our higher elevations only reach about 6,000 to 7,000 feet, which, considering the entire PCT, is fairly median. I mean, if you're talking California, you're upwards of 12,000 and 13,000 feet. Here in Oregon, you're quite a bit lower. However, it still can get pretty chilly in the evenings. You know, it can drop down into the 40s, maybe the 30s overnight. It's not unheard of for it to snow in the middle of Oregon in summertime. It happens every now and then. Not a regular thing, but it could. I definitely encourage you to pack warm clothing just as a precaution. I recommend down insulation wear. If you have a down jacket and a pair of thermals, you should be totally fine. Down is good because it's extremely more lightweight and extremely compressible, so you can smash it down into your pack, not have to worry about it being too bulky or too heavy. And down jackets, they often compress into a pocket of their own, and you can use it as a handy pillow for sleeping on if you don't have to wear it.
Okay, John also has a question about snow, but in regard to navigation. So says, would like to hear anything about snow travel and route finding, and it is harder to do route finding on the snow, so what advice do you have?
That's a really good question, and one I have intimate experience with myself. Route finding in the snow can be extremely challenging if you're not used to route finding in the snow. It is not difficult to get lost in the snow, even for experienced hikers. All it takes for you to do is turn around in a forested area that's covered with snow, that's hard packed and not leaving any footprints, and all of a sudden you can be lost. It's that easy. I definitely recommend, if you're thinking about snow travel, that you be extremely proficient with a map and compass, that if you can, carry a GPS device. And I defer towards dedicated GPS devices like a Garmin or a device such as that. Cell phones are good too, but cell phone batteries do not last long when you're using them as a GPS device. They can drain those batteries really fast. There are definitely certain things that you can watch for while you're out there hiking in the snow, you know, to help you stay on the right path, such as watching for trail blazes, tree markers. In forested areas, another suggestion that I always suggest for people to look for are logouts, because anywhere you see a logout, that indicates that there's a trail there. And that's anywhere where a log has fallen across the ground and sits horizontally on the ground, and there's a notch cut out of the log in order for the trail to pass through. That's a clear sign of a trail being in that area. And so there are definitely signs that you can look for. There are definitely methods that you can take for being a safe winter navigator. I encourage you to do a little bit of research on the matter because it can be challenging and you should definitely practice. And if you're going to be doing winter navigation in mountainous areas where you're going to have to deal with steep elevations in regards to, you know, slopes, and there definitely are some of those here in Oregon in the central areas, that you also carry and use traction devices such as a pair of microspikes or the like yak traction devices. And you might also want to consider carrying an arresting device such as an ice axe and knowing how to do that. It's good to practice with those items if you're not familiar with them. But that way you can be safe in the knowledge that you're out there, you're knowing what you're doing, you're prepared for the situation, and you're also ready if any contingencies arise. Of course, if you don't want to hassle with all that, you can wait another month for it all to melt out, and then you can hike free and clear of all of that on easy to see snow-free trail.
John also asks, are the resupply points reliable?
Absolutely. Most of the resupply points here in Oregon are extremely hiker friendly. And all of the ones that I list both in the guidebook and on my website have been verified as being current resuppliers who are happy to help out hikers. They definitely go out of their way. Some of them even offer rides to and from trailheads and extra little bonuses for hikers passing through because they just really like hikers here in Oregon and are happy to help them out.
How about Erica asks, can I hike the PCT with my dog?
Oh, that's a great question, Erica, and you will be happy to hear that yes, you can hike the PCT with your dog. There is just one exception, which I will share with you right now, and that is in Crater Lake National Park. Because being a national park, they do not permit dogs on hiking trails. So the only section where you would be challenged for hiking with your dog is in Section 2 of Oregon. And that's primarily the Sky Lakes Wilderness and Crater Lake National Park. And unfortunately, there is not a real easy exit point through the Sky Lakes Wilderness where you can dodge around Crater Lake. So that would probably be a section that I would just suggest to skip with your dog in order to avoid that complication. But the entire rest of the state is free and clear for hiking with dogs. I will suggest, though, if you're going to be hiking with your dog, there are a couple of areas, specifically in Section 1 in the southern portion of the state, and in the central portion of the state, Section 4, where there are quite a few expansive lava beds that the PCT crosses straight through. And lava is extremely rough and sharp and loose, and it could be pretty bad on dogs' paws. So if you're going to be hiking with your dog through these areas, I would recommend getting your dog some of those little booties to keep their feet protected from those particular areas.
Glenn asks, how scarce do water sources get in August and September?
Hi, Glenn. That is a great question, too. And I will tell you that, you know, naturally as summer progresses, some of our water sources start diminishing. In Oregon, also, a lot of the water that you're going to find alongside the trail comes from standing lakes and ponds that are naturally going to diminish as the season goes by. In the guidebook, I'm very explicit to indicate which resources are reliable throughout the course of the summer and then which are more seasonal. A lot of the seasonal ones are some of the smaller springs and some of the smaller ponds in some areas, but there are still plenty of lakes and other larger water sources where you could easily tank up. But do consider that aside from the seasonal availability of water, there are a few sections where there are long, dry stretches of trail with no access to water. a couple of those upwards of about 25 miles. So there are definitely ways to get water, and I indicate how to do that in the guidebook where the options are for detouring off of the PCT so that you can make sure you have access to water, and where you want to tank up where you find a water source so that it can get you through a long distance, or in the case that you need to dry camp and have a little bit extra with you.
Gary asks whether there are benefits or challenges to hiking either north to south versus or south to north. Which do you recommend, and which is harder, which is easier, I guess, is the question.
Hi, Gary. That's a good question and a smart one for asking, because you definitely want to hike the easier way, right? Well, I will tell you this, that the PCT, hiking it from south to north, has about 70,000 feet of elevation gain. That's where you're going up the hills and then down the hills, and then up the hills and then down the hills. Now, if you're hiking from north to south, there is 80,000 feet of elevation gain. That's because the slopes on the north aspects of most of Oregon's big ridges and divides are higher and steeper on the north sides. So if you're going to be hiking north to south, you can expect to do a little bit more climbing over some of those big ridges.
If you're section hiking it, Eli, would you, is there any of those sections that you would recommend going one way and then the other way on others?
I would definitely recommend that if you're thinking about hiking the last section, that's section 6 from Timberline on Mount Hood to the Columbia River Gorge, that you hike that one from south to north. Because if you were to go and strip all of the trees out of the Columbia River Gorge down to bare rock, you would have a formation that's actually similar to the Grand Canyon in Arizona, because there's over 5,000 feet of elevation distance between the Columbia River Gorge and the top of the Columbia Plateau. So if you're hiking from south to north from Cascade Locks on the Columbia River, you immediately have a steep 5,000 foot climb to do right out of the gate. And that can really wear you out as a starting point. So for that reason, I definitely recommend starting at the opposite end of that section and going from Timberline Lodge, and then having a nice, easier hike northwards, and then going downhill to the Columbia River. Of course, downhill, has some challenges, especially if you've got shaky knees, but there's a neat alternate trail that you can take going that way, where you can avoid that big descent and actually experience one of the Columbia River Gorge's pretty spectacular canyons as an alternate route.
Melissa says in 5 weeks she plans to start at Willamette Highway and go Nobo, is that northbound?
Northbound.
And do a summit of the South Sister. How far off the PCT is the summit trail?
Let's see. Okay, accessing South Sister from the PCT, you're talking about maybe, I say about a day's hike, because once you go through that area, you enter the Three Sisters Wilderness, you go over the hill that's right near Elk Lake, and then you head out into the Wikiup Plain, which is on the southwest side of South Sister. There's a trail there that deviates off of the PCT to the east, and that heads to Moraine Lake, which is kind of the kickoff point for South Sister summiting. So if you're thinking about adding South Sister as a side trip to your PCT hike, I would say give yourself at least an extra couple of days, because you could take a day once you detour off the PCT, set yourself up at camp there at Moraine Lake. The next day, go and tag the South Sister summit, and then you can head all the way back down and reconnect with the PCT afterwards, and then continue on your way. So I would suggest 2 extra days for that side trip.
Muriel wonders whether you have any anecdotes about the most dangerous experience you have faced while hiking the PCT. And maybe this is a general question about dangers that could be expected or possible?
I definitely had an uncomfortable experience when I was researching for the guidebook when I was out on the PCT in the summer of 2014. It was one of the warmer, drier years here in the Northwest, and I was doing section hikes in the southern portion of the state in the Sky Lakes Wilderness. It's a spectacular area. It's fairly remote. It's high ridge walking above, lots of forested lake basins. When you get up into the high country, there's some real spectacular views. Well, this one particular summer, as I mentioned, it was really warm, it was really dry, and every afternoon, because of that fast warming every day, these big thunderstorms would develop over the crest, and they would start spitting lightning out all over the hillsides. And so I was watching lightning strike the hills around me, which was not a comforting experience. There were even a couple of close calls that made me stop and pause and consider getting out. But I kept on going for a few days. And then when I got up to a point on Devil's Peak, which is kind of in the heart of the Sky Lakes Wilderness, I found that I had wildfires burning on 3 sides of me because there were large smoke plumes in front of me and behind me and off to the west of me. Well, this was probably one of the most scary experiences I've ever had in the backcountry, and I've been a backcountry hiker for about 30 years. And so I kind of paused to assess my situation. I pulled out my satellite phone, I called my wife, and I gave her an update on my situation, told her I was looking at wildfires in 3 directions. Well, because we had a contingency plan already set up, she knew exactly where I was going to be going. She was following me on my GPS track via my satellite transmitter, and she had the resources, the phone numbers for all of the forest districts that I was going to be hiking through. Because I don't know if I mentioned I was doing this by myself. I was on a solo trip. And so what she was able to do was she was able to relay my information to the nearest Forest Service office, tell them exactly where I was and what I was seeing, and then they were able to give her information on what I should do. And so she was able to get back to me and give me directions on how to proceed. And so I was able to then proceed safely ahead. And the Forest Service knew that I was back in that area with those lighting wildfires nearby. And that is that's a good segue into what is probably one of the most important things that you can do when you're thinking about preparing your PCT trip, is to inform somebody when and where you're going, how long you're going to be out there, when your expected return date is, and setting up contingency plans just in case something happens. And it might not be wildfires, but it could be, maybe a, torrential rainstorm happens while you're out there and it just soaks you to the bone and you need to exit the trail a different way, or you need to turn around and go back. Or say, you blow out a hiking boot or something, you have some other gear failure. But having a plan in place with somebody back home and contingencies in case something arises that way, and a plan in place for communication. That way you can ensure that you're going to be safe out there, that somebody knows where you are, and that if something happens, then that person knows who to contact in the case of an emergency, if need arises. So always have a plan in place and share that plan with somebody back home, because you don't want to be like the guy who had to cut his arm off. We definitely don't want that.
Dick asks, what about bugs you hear about on the Oregon PCT? Are they the same, better, or worse than bugs in Washington when the bugs are out, he says, in July and August, for example?
Well, I've hiked in bug season in both Oregon and Washington, and I would say they're pretty comparable depending on where you're going, because I don't hike in Indian Heaven or the Sky Lakes at any time of July, because I know that I would go out there and get eaten alive. Interestingly, I just heard the other day from a state biologist that we can expect this year to be especially buggy. That's because of our high snow levels, the amount of rain that we received over the spring, the extended time that it's taking for everything to melt out. That's leaving a lot of standing water and wet forest around. And so we can expect the bugs to be pretty miserable through the first half of summer. Usually by the end of July, early August, then they've kind of done their thing and they start to diminish. But if you're planning on hiking anytime in July, I would suggest that you be well armed and prepared for bugs. That includes a good, reliable bug spray. Definitely encouraged to wear long pants and long sleeves. You might even want to get one of those head nets to keep them out of your face. Because this year will probably be a little irritating to start off. Yeah, there's no way around it.
Stephanie asks, how late is too late in the year to hike the sections that cross higher elevations?
That's a good question, Stephanie. And you know, it varies from year to year. We like to say that typically you can continue to hike the PCT through Oregon all the way through middle to end of October. Nicely, here in Oregon, we don't get hit with the winter storms quite as fast as Washington does. And every now and then when we get an Indian summer, then that lets us enjoy the trails a little bit farther out there into fall, which can be pretty spectacular because that's when you start to see the huckleberry and the vine maple and some of those other seasonal plants start to change color and really paint the PCT in a palette of color that you don't normally see in the summertime. But again, that can be highly variable. It seems in recent years that summers and falls have never been consistent, so it's just one reason to kind of keep an eye on the weather and see how lucky we get and what we can pull off when fall starts rolling around.
John has a couple questions about fording streams and creeks, and he wants to know how deep he might expect them to be, deeper than knee, and are forded creeks braided?
Well, the creeks that you're going to cross here in Oregon, and the ones that I'm thinking mostly on the flanks of Mount Jefferson and Mount Hood, they are they're fairly bouldery, so you get a lot of white water coming down through channeled boulders and what have you. I would say in early season, you could probably expect it to be waist high, if not more, which to me, that means it's time to turn around because the water coming down off of these mountains, particularly in the chutes on Mount Jefferson and Mount Hood, can be extremely treacherous when the water is high. Unfortunately, there have been fatalities in the last couple of years, some people trying to cross these creeks during high water. You know, that being said, definitely if the water is too high, I would say above thigh level, then it's not worth crossing. You're really taking a chance there. When you do approach these creeks and you're looking at crossing them, then you're likely going to have to scout up and downstream to find the safest crossing spot. And that would be where the water is usually wider and obviously flatter. And in that case, then you want to make sure you're unbuckling all of your pack's belts so that if you do happen to fall in, you can easily get out of your pack so that it doesn't drag you down. If you're crossing any of these channels, they are extremely rocky, so I do not recommend taking your boots off because you will just slip right off of those rocks and go right in. So just plunge right through in your boots, or if you've got water crossing shoes, then definitely recommend using those if you carry those. Definitely use your best judgment. Creeks are not something to mess around with at flood levels because they will sweep you right off your feet, and and that's all there is.
Okie doke. Wendy has a question. She says she's going to be doing section 4 in mid-August, and she's wondering about bear storage, hang a bag, Ursack, canister. And she also says, do you know about sending food to Elk Lake Resort? And yeah, how about those two?
Yes, I definitely recommend that you take proper methods to store your food, because there are bears out on the PCT, and they would love to get into your trail mix and your other goodies. What's more likely to happen, though, is the squirrels and the chipmunks are going to get into your food. And so hanging your food is definitely recommended. I strongly suggest you do not store food in your tent. I have known people that have stored food in their tent, and the critters have chewed right through the sidewall of their tent and gotten into their food anyway. Bears getting into food is not so much of a problem here in Oregon as what you hear down in the Sierras in California, where they've been more habituated to hikers and getting into hiker food. We simply don't have bears like that here in Oregon. The bears in Oregon are pretty skittish. If you're lucky to see one, then count that as a real treat on the trail, because the bears here in Oregon are going to probably be in the wind before you even know they're in the area. I have yet to see a bear in Oregon, and I've been hiking in Oregon for more than 12 years. But as far as storing your food, I am a big advocate of the Ursack. I use that a lot. It is my go-to food bag, because all you have to do is tie it off, and you don't have to worry about any critter getting into your food. I still hang that whenever I can, when there's trees around, but when I'm above timberline, even if I can't hang it, then I know my food is secure, because I can just tie it off and throw it a ways away from my camp, and little critters still can't get into my bag. There's no place here in Oregon that requires bear canisters, so you don't need to worry about carrying those here in Oregon. Not like you do in the Sierras in California or in some portions of Washington. I will say, though, that every now and then I do use a canister, even though I don't have to, because it is kind of an effortless way to store your food. You don't have to worry about hanging. You don't have to worry about anything else. You just screw the lid on and let it go. And they double as really great stools when you just kind of want a place to sit.
She also asked if you knew about sending a food box to Elk Lake Resort.
That's right. Yes, you can definitely send food to Elk Lake Resort. I think they might charge a small fee. Currently, it's around $5, but you can definitely send food there. They do hold packages for hikers. There's information on where and how to send food to Elk Lake Resort, both in my guidebook and on pctoregon.com, as well as how to send that, because certain resorts ask that you send your packages by certain mail methods. Some prefer United States Post Office, others prefer UPS or FedEx, depending on how they receive packages. So definitely check into that information before you pop your box into the mail. There are items that you cannot mail. You cannot mail fuel, you cannot mail batteries. So if you think you're going to need those items, then I would call those resorts ahead of time to see what kind of offerings they have, because a lot of those resorts, they do stock those items for hikers. So if you're needing food and sundries and other items, go ahead and send those, but plan to buy fuel and batteries at these locations if you're going to need those items as well.
And she had one last question. Any doable camping sites between McKenzie and Santiam Passes?
Between McKenzie and Santiam Passes camping? That is a good question. There are a couple of locations where you can find a decent campsite. That is a long stretch between those two highways, and it's mostly dry. There's not a lot of water through there. This year, there may actually be water at Washington Ponds. That specific area has been dry for the last couple of seasons just because of our warmer drought conditions, but this year with all of our snow and water, there might actually be some water there, at least in the early part of summer. But there are a couple of good campsites near that area. And then, let's see, I think there's a couple of, not necessarily campsites, but there are a few areas, flat spaces, where they're decent enough to throw down a tent if you want to just dry camp for a night. I do indicate those options in the section hiking the PCT in Oregon guidebook, so that's definitely a possibility, because that is a long stretch to go in one day. I have done it in one day. It's about 18 miles, and when it's in the middle of summer, it's warm. There's a lot of exposed lava bed. There's a section of burned forest. It can get pretty hot. So breaking that section in half is definitely an advantage.
John wants to know what 5 things he shouldn't bring.
5 things you should not bring. Let's see. I'm going to say don't bring your boombox, because a lot of people like to enjoy the sound of the birds and the wind and the water, and would rather not listen to somebody blasting Taylor Swift or Nickelback or whatever other music they like. So in that sense, I would say respect people, and if you want to enjoy your music, do it with headphones. I would say it's probably good to leave the alcohol behind, because alcohol only accelerates dehydration, and dehydration and hiking don't mix well. So maybe save the beer and other alcohol for celebration time when you finish your hike. Let's see, I would say, what else not to bring? 5 things. Wow, you're really putting me on the spot here. I would say don't bring raw red meat, if that's even a consideration. I do know people that have actually hauled out to the backcountry steaks and grilled them on a barbecue. But that is only bound to attract maybe some larger 4-legged company that you might not want to have in the backcountry. So I would say maybe leave the steak at home, and again, save that for your celebration when you finish your hike. I'm gonna flip this over on the other side, and I'm gonna give you a few suggestions on what you should bring, actually. And these go beyond your normal, your normal base items. I suggest bring a camp chair. I carry a camp chair. It's a little 1-pound camp chair. I'm gonna just tell you what it is. It's the Helinox Chair Zero. They don't pay me to advertise that, but it's my favorite chair. Bundled up into its package, it's about the size of the soda cup. It's really small. It only weighs 1 pound. And anytime I want to stop and take a break, I just pull it out of the side pocket of my pack. I set it up in under a minute, and I'm just kicking back, enjoying a view in my nice comfy camp chair anywhere I am along the trail. I use it for my lunch stops. I use it for my snack breaks. When I'm in camp, it's great because I can sit in a comfortable chair and I can make my dinner, and I don't have to worry about sitting and getting poked in the rear end by a log or a rock or something like that. I also recommend bringing along some treats that you like to eat at the that help boost your mood. Like maybe you've got like a favorite candy, or maybe you've got like a another item that you really like, or if you're if you're the thoughtful type, maybe you like to keep a journal. Maybe you like to take photos if you're creative. Maybe you like to read or something. I definitely encourage you to bring along something either that puts you in a happy place or that keeps you occupied during downtimes. Because as you're hiking along, especially if you're new to long distance hiking, you're going to experience some emotions that you may not be accustomed to when you get out into the backcountry for multiple days on end. I mean, you're throwing yourself into what could be a brand new situation. You're far from home, you're far from what you know and what's comfortable. And so having some kind of comfort item can help relieve a little bit of that stress that you might start building up as you get deeper and deeper into the woods and farther away from your car. And then it's nice to, when you get into camp at the end of the day, just kind of be able to kick back and relax, because if you have nothing to do, then you're going to sit there and you're going to kind of twiddle your thumbs and you're going to watch the clouds go by. And I'm a big advocate of watching the clouds blow by, because I can do that for a long time. But you might start to go a little bit stir crazy if you don't have something to occupy yourself. So that's where I suggest bringing along a deck of cards or something to read. I mean, it's great. Now you can carry a book on your phone, and you don't have to carry a big, bulky, heavy book. And that way, while you're sitting in your tent and you're waiting to go to sleep, you can occupy yourself. Or, as sometimes happens, sometimes even in the middle of summer, you'll just get a downpour. And if you don't want to hike in the rain, you're going to wait it out in your tent. And having something to occupy, you during that time when you're waiting for that rain to stop will definitely keep you from kind of going a little bit buggy.
Jerry has a couple of questions related to the things you've just talked about, Eli. One, he's not familiar with an Ursack and wonders what that is. And then also, what's the name of your 1 pound chair? He thinks that's pretty cool.
The Ursack, I'll start with that one. That is a food bag that is made by a company called Ursack. You can find them at ursack.com. The Ursack is a bag that is made out of a Kevlar-like material. It's been certified grizzly bear proof. They cannot get into these things. They've even shot at them with a low caliber gun, and it was bulletproof. And so it is definitely a serious bag for keeping the critters out of your food. I use one myself. I definitely recommend them. You can visit ursack.com. That's ursack.com for more information. And as a matter of fact, I'm giving away an Ursack on my website with my current promotion. So that's another good reason to visit pctoregon.com and sign up for that giveaway, because that's going to be one of the items in this package. And the other thing was the chair is called the Helinox Chair Zero. Those are available through REI. I believe they're about $100. Again, 2 thumbs up for the lightweight camping chair.
Joan asks, I've read that some of the campsites are just clearings. Are they marked in any way, or are they easy to spot? I'm concerned I may hike right past them.
The campsites along the PCT, you will find, Joan, they range in quality from one end to the other. Through the entire guidebook, I tried to indicate the manner of campsite that's listed at every single location, so that you have an idea of what to expect. Some of the sites that we consider the developed sites may be named. They will be larger sites that are plainly visible from the trail. You'll often spot these sites because there will be fire rings, there will be downed logs that are used for benches, there will be obvious, if they're, just off the trail, there will be obvious boot paths to go to these areas. These are pretty hard to miss. There are smaller one-off sites that are scattered all over the PCT. These also are indicated in the book by way of, where they are located approximately on the trail, and which side of the trail they may be on and how large they may be. Some of these may be kind of what you call primitive campsites, where they're not necessarily official sites, but they're obviously used by PCT hikers. And even these too may have fire rings. They may have a log that's down nearby for sitting, or other rocks around the area. And these too are fairly easy to pick out. And then there's kind of just what's called dispersed camping. And those are just kind of open, clear areas where the area is flat enough to throw down a tent, where you won't have to worry about rolling off of your sleeping pad or anything like that. There are no other amenities, such as fire rings or rocks to sit on. But really, there are no limitations to where you can camp on the PCT here in Oregon, I will say, with two exceptions. Crater Lake National Park does have designated camp areas that require permits. So in those areas, you have to get a permit and camp in designated spots, but they tell you where those spots are. There are actually two other areas where there are designated sites that require permits. You'll find more info on that both in the book and on pctoregon.com. And there are a few areas where there's private land down in southern Oregon at the very bottom of the state, but that land is not in any condition where you would want to camp there anyway, so you don't even really have to worry about it. But that being said, that was kind of a lot of information I just threw at you. Anytime you're in national forest or wilderness areas, then you can camp wherever you like. You don't have to stay in designated campsites. Of course, it's recommended that you use existing already impacted sites in order to avoid creating new sites and creating new impact, especially in sensitive areas. If you are going to create a new site or just kind of pick an area to camp, then it's recommended that you follow standard leave no trace practice, and that is to set up your camp on a durable surface, and that is usually dirt, rock, sand, dry grass, or snow, at least 100 feet from trails and any water sources. You should definitely avoid camping on any vegetation or any sensitive meadow areas. But really, you have the ability to camp pretty much wherever you like. So if you feel like scouting off trail and maybe finding someplace to camp on a high ridge, or maybe spotting a lake or a pond somewhere and want to go check it out, you have that option available to you. But the book in itself, actually, it lists nearly 200 places through Oregon that have been identified as decent camp areas. So you shouldn't have any problem finding a place to throw your tent down anywhere you go through the state.
Okay, well, we've drifted past our stop. There are a couple of more questions, and I've just jotted those down along with the askers, Eli, and I'll send them to you perhaps, and we'll look for their emails, and maybe you can
Sure.
shoot them an answer to those.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Folks, let's see. We've got one more slide here, and that's the slide about our Don't Die Out There next webinar, in which we'll have our technology fully under control, or at least we'll cross our fingers for that outcome. But episode 2, it's going to be featuring Jeff Renner is the presenter, and he was a weatherman here in Washington for many, many years, on TV, and has written the book. He's got a new product called Mountain Weather Pocket Guide, something you can take with you, but he also has a book called Mountain Weather, and he knows an awful lot about this. Jeff has contributed to Mountaineering the Freedom of the Hills, the weather section in that too. So I think that's going to be really good. And in any case, we really want to thank you again for being part of our very first episode, warts and all, and we hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any more questions for us, you can visit Eli's website, or you can shoot us an email at mbooks@mountaineersbooks.org, and also visit our partners in this, Oregon Wild and the Mazamas. Thank you so much for attending. See you next time.